you some information that we've identified. We need to look into it a little bit further to understand all the nuances. Yes, sir, in the back.
Mike Lurie, KCRA TV Sacramento. Based on the evidence of what you've uncovered so far, would it be fair to say that you're looking more at a cause of pilot error as opposed to mechanical error?
The question is based on the information that has been provided so far, are we looking at pilot error versus mechanical error? At this point, the NTSB has released a lot of information.
Requested. Those requests for recorded vote will rise and be counted. Sufficient number having risen, recorded vote is ordered. Members will record their vote by electronic device. This will be a 2-minute vote.
We expect 10 more amendment votes in this series. This one, offered by Republican Paul Brown of Georgia, reduces spending on renewable energy and efficiency programs by nearly $5 million. President Obama's nominee for FBI director testified on Capitol Hill today in his confirmation hearing, saying that waterboarding is torture and illegal. The Hill writes that James Comey's criticism of waterboarding came during a wide-ranging hearing that covered the force-feeding of detainees at the Guantanamo Bay prison, the National Security Agency's data mining programs, and whether civilian courts should be used to try terrorists. But the issue at the top of the agenda was the enhanced interrogation techniques that were used when Comey was a member of the Bush administration's Justice Department. Mr. Comey nearly resigned in 2004 over concerns he raised about electronic surveillance orders that he thought to be illegal. The administration eventually halted the program. You can see James Comey's confirmation hearing in our overnight programming here on C-SPAN and anytime at cspan.org. On this vote, the yeas are 158, the nays are 256. The amendment is not agreed to. The unfinished business is the request for recorded vote on the amendment offered by the gentleman from California, Mr. Swalwell, on which the further proceedings were postponed, on which the noes prevailed by voice vote. The clerk will redesignate the amendment.
Amendment offered by Mr. Swalwell of California.
Recorded vote having been requested, those in support of recorded vote will rise and be counted. Sufficient number having risen, recorded vote is ordered. Members will record their vote by electronic device. This is a 2-minute vote. 2-minute voting continues in the House with more amendment debate expected later tonight.
And tomorrow, in addition to live coverage of the House and Senate, we'll also have a House Ways and Means Committee hearing on the Obama administration's delaying the employer mandate part of the health care law. That'll be live on C-SPAN 3 at 10 a.m. Eastern. And in the afternoon at 2:30, the Senate Agriculture Committee looks at the purchase of Smithfield Foods by a Chinese company. We'll also have that live on C-SPAN 3. On this vote, the yeas are 201, the nays are 213. The amendment is not agreed to. The unfinished business is a request of recorded vote on the amendment offered by the gentleman from California, Mr. McClintock, on which further proceedings were postponed, on which the noes were prevailing by voice vote. The clerk will redesignate the amendment.
Amendment offered by Mr. McClintock of California.
Recorded vote having been requested, those in support of a request to recorded vote will rise and be counted. Sufficient number having arisen, a recorded vote is ordered. Members that record their vote by electronic device, this will be a 2-minute vote. On this vote, the yeas are 115, the nays are 300. The amendment is not agreed to. The unfinished business is a request for recorded vote on the amendment offered by the gentleman from California, Mr. Peters, on which further proceedings were postponed, on which the noes vote by voice vote. The clerk will redesignate the amendment.
Amendment offered by Mr. Peters of California.
The recorded vote has been requested. Those in support of the request for recorded vote will rise and be counted. Sufficient number having risen, the recorded vote is ordered. Members will record their vote by electronic device. This is a 2-minute vote.
The votes the House has been taking have been on amendments that mostly either add or subtract money from renewable energy and efficiency programs. This one would increase spending by $10 million. We covered the memorial service today for the Arizona firefighters that were killed on June 30th. The New York Times writes about it this way. The 19 firefighters were mourned slowly, as if those who knew them wanted to relive each memory before it, too, was gone for good. Over the parched mountains from where the Granite Mountain hotshots died a little more than a week ago, thousands of firefighters and family members packed an arena to honor their bravery. You can see the memorial service in overnight programming over on C-SPAN 2 and anytime at cspan.org. On this vote, the yeas are 191, the nays are 223. The amendment is not agreed to. The unfinished business is a request for recorded vote on the amendment offered by the gentleman from Colorado, Mr. Perlmutter, which further proceedings were postponed and on which the noes prevailed by voice vote. The clerk will redesignate the amendment.
Amendment offered by Mr. Perlmutter of Colorado.
A recorded vote has been requested. Those in support for request for recorded vote will rise and be counted. Sufficient number having risen, the recorded vote is ordered. Members will record their vote by electronic device. This is a 2-minute vote.
6 more amendment votes are expected after this one. Wanted to tell you a little bit about the Energy and Water Projects bill. The total cost of the bill is just over $30 billion, a reduction over current spending. It makes cuts to clean energy programs and increases spending on maintaining the nation's nuclear weapons stockpile. The bill is being considered under an open amendment process, meaning there's no limit on the number of amendments members can offer. And after this series of votes, members will continue amendment debate.
Yeah, on this vote, the yeas are 177, the nays are 238. The amendment is not agreed to. The unfinished business is a request for a recorded vote on the amendment offered by the gentleman from Virginia, Mr. Connolly, on which further proceedings were postponed, on which the noes prevailed by voice vote. The clerk will redesignate the amendment.
Amendment offered by Mr. Connolly of Virginia.
Recorded vote has been requested. Those in support of the request for recorded vote will rise and be counted. Sufficient number having risen, the recorded vote is ordered. Members will record their vote on electronic device. This is a 2-minute vote.
Here in the House, more debate is expected tomorrow on the energy and water bill. And on the other side of the Capitol, senators return to work tomorrow to continue debate on a pair of competing plans aimed at addressing the doubling of student loan interest rates. A vote to cut off debate on a Democratic proposal is set for noon. The bill, sponsored by Democratic Senator Jack Reed of Rhode Island, would roll back the student loan interest rate to 3.4% for 1 year to give lawmakers more time to craft a more permanent fix. Meanwhile, a bipartisan group of senators are still working behind the scenes to come up with an alternative that would tie student loan interest rates to the 10-year Treasury note. The Senate may stay on the student loan issue throughout the week. And as always, you can see live coverage of the Senate on C-SPAN 2.
This vote, the yeas are 174, the nays are 242. The amendment is not agreed to. The unfinished business is a request for a recorded vote on the amendment offered by the gentleman from California, Mr. Takano, on which further proceedings were postponed, on which no votes prevailed by voice vote. The clerk will redesignate the amendment.
Amendment offered by Mr. Takano of California.
Recorded vote having been requested, those in support for request for recorded vote will rise and be counted. Sufficient number having risen, recorded vote is ordered. Members will record their vote by electronic device. This is a 2-minute vote.
This is the first of 2 votes on amendments offered by Congressman Mark Takano of California. The one the House is voting on now would increase spending on renewable energy and efficiency programs by $20 million and decrease funding for nuclear weapons by the same amount. Some news from today in the Associated Press. U.S. regulators have labeled insurer American International Group and General Electric's finance arm as potential threats to the financial system, designations that bring stricter government oversight. The Financial Stability Oversight Council today announced the 2 companies would be the first to be designated systemically important. And as a result, they must increase their financial cushion against losses, limit their use of borrowed money, and submit to inspections by examiners. They'll be under the supervision of the Federal Reserve.
254. The nays are 252. The amendment is not agreed to. The unfinished business is a request for a recorded vote on the amendment by the gentleman from California, Mr. Takano, on which further proceedings were postponed, on which the noes prevailed by voice vote. The clerk will redesignate the amendment.
Amendment offered by Mr. Takano of California.
A recorded vote has been requested. Those in support of a recorded vote will rise and be counted. The sufficient number having arisen, a recorded vote is ordered. Members will record their vote by electronic device. This is a 2-minute vote. I'm here anyway, so good. Any way I can help. On this vote, the yeas are 166, the nays are 250. The amendment is not agreed to. The unfinished business is a request for a recorded vote on the amendment offered by the gentleman from Nevada, Mr. Heck, on which further proceedings were postponed, on which the noes votes prevailed by voice vote. The clerk will redesignate the amendment.
Amendment offered by Mr. Heck of Nevada.
Recorded vote having been requested, those in support of the request for recorded vote will rise and be counted. Sufficient number having arisen, recorded vote is ordered. Members will record their vote by electronic device. This will be a 2-minute vote.
There are 2 more amendment votes after this one. The House Ways and Means Committee will hold a hearing tomorrow on the Obama administration delaying the employer mandate part of the health care law. That'll be live on C-SPAN 3 at 10 a.m. Eastern. The New York Times writes that House Republican leaders today seized on the Obama administration's one-year delay, demanding the same postponement for the mandate on individual insurance purchases and promising a series of showdowns aimed at dividing Democrats from the White House. The story goes on to say, after more than 2 years of voting repeatedly and unsuccessfully to repeal the health care law, Republicans believe they're getting traction, thanks to what they see as the Obama administration's self-inflicted wound over the employer mandate. And again, the House Ways and Means Committee will hold a hearing tomorrow on the delay of the employer mandate. That'll be live on C-SPAN 3 at 10 Eastern.
On this vote, the ayes are 81, the nays are 335. The amendment is not agreed to. The unfinished business is a request for a recorded vote on the amendment offered by the gentleman from North Carolina, Mr. Butterfield, on which further proceedings were postponed, on which the noes were prevailed by voice vote. The clerk will redesignate the amendment.
Amendment offered by Mr. Butterfield of North Carolina.
Recorded vote having been requested. Those supportive of recorded vote will rise and be counted. Sufficient number having arisen. A recorded vote is ordered. Members will record their vote by electronic device. This is a 2-minute vote.
This amendment is offered by Representative Butterfield of North Carolina. It would transfer $127 million from nuclear weapons to science programs. As we mentioned earlier, the Senate will vote tomorrow on whether to cut off debate on a Democratic proposal on student loan interest rates. It's set for noon Eastern. A headline in The Hill says student loan compromises hinge on interest rate cap. Senate negotiations over reversing a federal student loan interest rate hike that occurred on July 1st seem to have boiled down to one main sticking point: whether or not to include a cap on market-based interest rates to protect borrowers, and if so, how. The progress toward a compromise comes more than a week after Congress failed to prevent the interest rate on the subsidized portion of the Stafford loan from doubling to 6.8%. And Democrats are set to bring a bill to the Senate floor tomorrow that would extend for 1 year the fixed 3.4% interest rate, with a cloture vote set on the motion to proceed. But the story goes on to say, without 60 votes to block a Republican filibuster, it's expected to fail. You can watch our Senate coverage tomorrow on C-SPAN 2.
On this vote, the yeas are 150, the nays are 266. The amendment is not agreed to. The unfinished business is the request for recorded vote on the amendment offered by the gentleman from Illinois, Mr. Foster, on which further proceedings were postponed, on which the noes prevailed by voice vote. The clerk will redesignate the amendment.
Amendment offered by Mr. Foster of Illinois.
Recorded vote having been requested, those who support the request for recorded vote will rise and be counted. Sufficient number having arisen, the recorded vote is ordered. Members will record their vote by electronic device. This is a 2-minute vote.
This is the last vote of the night on an amendment from Congressman Garamendi of California. It would transfer $329 million from nuclear weapons to science programs. The Energy and Water Projects Bill is being considered under an open amendment process, meaning there's no limit on the number of amendments that members can offer. So amendment debate will continue after this vote.
On this vote, the yeas are 143, the nays are 273. The amendment is not agreed to. The committee will be in order. Go ahead and call on him. Yeah. Which clerk doesn't have to read. We can go straight to him. No, yeah, but I can go ahead. That's what I was making sure. Yeah, he's standing already. Gentleman from Nevada, rise.
I have an amendment at the desk.
Clerk will report.
Amendment offered by Mr. Heck of Nevada, page 29, line 21. After the dollar amount, insert increase by $14 million. Page 30, line 6. After the dollar amount, insert reduced by $16,546,000.
Gentleman recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to thank the chairman of the subcommittee and the ranking member for the work they've done on this bill, but I especially want to
The gentleman will suspend. The committee is, the House is not in order. The committee is not in order. Please take conversations off the floor. The gentleman will resume.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Again, I'd like to thank the subcommittee chairman and the ranking member for the work they've done on this bill, but specifically want to thank the Appropriations Committee staff for helping me fine-tune this amendment very quickly and at the last minute. My amendment transfers $16 million from the International Material Protection and Removal activities within the Global Threat Reduction Initiative to a program that will help secure our nuclear materials here at home. This year's budget request included funding for a project to construct a security perimeter around the Nevada National Security Site. Additionally, this funding was authorized by this House when we voted to pass H.R. 1960, the National Defense Authorization Act of 2014. However, the bill under consideration fails to provide funding for this critical project. I agree that we must work with other nations to ensure their nuclear material does not fall into the wrong hands and applaud the committee's efforts on this front. However, we should not neglect priorities to secure nuclear material on our own soil while providing $20 million in excess of what was requested to help foreign countries secure their nuclear materials. I'm simply requesting we transfer a relatively small sum, $16 million out of a total $2.1 billion, from a portion of the bill that provides funding to other countries to secure their nuclear materials and instead use that money to secure our own facilities containing nuclear materials. This funding will be used for the DAF ARGIS project, which will provide a state-of-the-art perimeter intrusion detection and assessment system at the Nevada National Security Site's device assembly facility. As I mentioned, this project is a priority for the Nevada National Security Site, was included in the President's budget request and authorized by the House just last month. I urge my colleagues to support this amendment, which will prioritize national security concerns here at home while still providing adequate funding to ensure nuclear material in other countries does not fall into the hands of those who wish to do us harm. And I yield back the balance of my time.
The gentleman yields back for purpose of the gentleman from New Jersey, rise.
Move to strike the last word, Mr.
The gentleman is recognized for 5 minutes.
I rise in reluctant opposition to the gentleman's amendment, and I salute, obviously, his desire to protect all of our nuclear sites. I certainly share the gentleman's concern for the security of our nuclear weapons infrastructure. The security incursion at Y2 at Oak Ridge in July of 2012 revealed some disturbing problems with federal oversight that directly impacted the effectiveness of the protective forces. In particular, a botched security upgrade project caused an excessive number of false alarms which distracted the security forces. And poor maintenance practices meant the security cameras where the protesters entered the high security area were not working. There is also was a second security upgrade project at Los Alamos that was installed incorrectly. The National Nuclear Security Administration is still working on getting that project back on track. We need to be able to upgrade our security systems, but I have concerns that taking on a third project in 2014 will lead to more problems. Our report has directed that NSSA to wait a year before starting the project at Nevada. Given the problems, I feel this is the most prudent path forward and will give the administration some time to implement the reforms that are so urgently needed in security oversight and project management. So I must reluctantly oppose the amendment at this time and yield back.
The gentleman yields back. For what purpose? The gentlewoman from Ohio rise.
Yes, Mr. Speaker. I move to strike the requisite number of words.
The gentlewoman is recognized for 5 minutes.
Yes, while the amendment is a modest one in terms of the funding in the account, which is over $400 million, I cannot support further cuts in this program. The budget already has cut $16 million from the Global Threat Reduction Initiative, and that means nuclear material that exists globally in places that we know we need to remove it. And so even though the gentleman's amendment is well intended, I think that we can't predict the consequences of this in terms of what we face globally to remove this material. I think it's very important to recognize that there are some unfriendly actors on the face of this earth, and we want to remove material as best as possible, working with others around the world to, as the program indicates, to reduce global threats that might result from those who shouldn't have this material in the first place. So I don't think that this is moving us in the right direction globally. I don't really think it's necessary, and I thank the gentleman for bringing it to the attention of the body. But I think that non-proliferation in general is $600 million below last year's activities when you compare it to past accounts. So I think that this is not in the best interest of the country and not in the best interest of national security. So I oppose the gentleman's amendment and yield back my remaining time. The
gentlewoman yields back. The question on the amendment offered by the gentleman from Nevada. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. In the opinion of the chair, the noes have it. The
Chairman, request a recorded vote.
The gentleman from Nevada.
Request a recorded vote.
Pursuant to Clause 6, Rule 18, further proceedings on the amendment from the gentleman from Nevada will be postponed. The gentleman from Colorado rise.
I have an amendment at the desk.
Clerk will report.
Amendment offered by Mr. Polis of Colorado, page 29, line 21. After the dollar amount, insert reduced by $13,072,000. Page 60, line 12. After the dollar amount, insert increased by $13,072,000.
Gentleman from Colorado is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm offering an amendment that will reduce the funding level for the W-76 by $13 million, back down to what the agency requested. The W-76 is a 1970s-era submarine-launched ballistic missile that was first introduced in the stockpile by the Navy in 1978. This bill actually increases funding by $13 million to increase funding levels above those required by the New START Treaty. If the New START Treaty levels are in effect, it requires us to have 1,550 nuclear weapons, plenty to deter any nuclear threat, plenty to obliterate any enemy, plenty to end life on Earth as we know it. And even if we were to reduce our stockpile to 1,000 nuclear weapons, the Arms Control Association stated that it would save over $39 billion. Now, this amendment doesn't even come close to going that far, but this puts that in perspective. If we reduced our number of nuclear weapons from 1,550 enough to obliterate any enemy and destroy life as we know it on Earth, to 1,000, enough to obliterate any enemy and end life as we know it on Earth. It would save $39 billion. This amendment very simply reduces funding by $13 million back to what the agency itself requested and doesn't detract from nuclear preparedness at all. These missiles are a continuing relic of Cold War policies that spend billions of taxpayer dollars every year, and it's a great opportunity for Congress to save taxpayer money while maintaining our national security. In fact, the current bill actually spends millions more than the military needs, and passage of my amendment will encourage focused, agile, lean military policy. In fact, a total of $1.8 billion is projected to be spent on W-76 by 2016. That's a lot of money to support a very dated set of preparedness, and my amendment makes a small dent in that by reducing the funding back to what the agency itself has requested. When we have these kinds of opportunities to maintain our national security and create savings for our country and reduce our budget deficit, we need to take it. Hans Christensen of the Federation of American Scientists has argued that while the W-76 is important for national security, we could, quote, probably reduce the refurbishment production by half and still retain enough W-76 warheads on the submarines for a credible retaliatory capability, end quote. Again, my amendment doesn't even come close to the marker that was set by Hans Christensen. It simply returns funding to the levels that the agency itself has asked for and reduces funding by $13 million. The GAO has been critical of the cost, schedule, and risks involved with the W-76 program. It is an area that is ripe for a relatively minor cut like this, which will help reduce our budget deficit by $13 million. My amendment would create $13 million in savings for taxpayers while maintaining our national security. I strongly urge my colleagues on both sides of the aisle to support it. The primary goals of the extension program extends the life of the original warheads from 20 to 60 years, addresses the aging issues, and refurbishes the system in a managed fashion. However, all these goals are accomplished under the funding levels that have been requested by the agency. And yet here in Congress, we're second-guessing the agency's own funding requirements and saying, let's give you more money. Take a few million more. Take a few million more while we cut RPE, a few million more while we cut science programs, a few million more while we cut our own nation's renewable energy future. And yet here's a few million more, 13 million more than an agency is even requesting to maintain nuclear deterrence at the level of 1,550 nuclear weapons and maintaining these particular W-76 warheads from the 1970s deployed by submarines that we don't even need the $13 million to accomplish. So again, I think this is some common sense savings. I encourage my colleagues on both sides of the aisle to support this smart cut, and I yield back the balance of my time.
The gentleman from Colorado yields back for purposes. The gentleman from New Jersey rise.
Move to strike the last word.
The gentleman is recognized for 5 minutes.
I rise to oppose the gentleman's amendment. The W-76 Life Extension Program is a critical ongoing program to extend the life of that warhead. This warhead supports the mission of our Navy's ballistic missile submarines, the most survivable leg of our nuclear deterrent. Our nuclear deterrent posture relies heavily on this Navy mission, but the President's budget request proposed to cut production of the W-76 by nearly 20%. I'm very concerned that these reductions to the W-76 were proposed without fully explaining the force structure implications or the impacts to national security. Therefore, this bill restores full funding for the W-76 to the levels previously provided to the committee last year in the NNSA's last acquisition report. Even the Department of Energy's Inspector General provided a report that stated that the National Nuclear Security Administration's plans to try to reduce costs of the ongoing W-76 program would not be achieved. That IG included that NNSA would need additional funds above the request to stay on track with their production requirements. This bill resolves those funding problems by increasing funding $13 million above the request. I strongly oppose the gentleman's amendment, and I yield back the benefit of the rest of my time.
Question is on the amendment offered by the gentleman from Colorado. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. Opinion of the chair, the noes have it.
Mr. Speaker,
gentleman from Colorado.
On that, I request a recorded vote.
Pursuant to Clause 6, Rule 18, further proceedings on the amendment offered by the gentleman from Colorado will be postponed. Read.
29, line 22, Defense Nuclear Nonproliferation. $2 billion,
Well, first,
$100 million.
from Texas, rise.
Mr. Speaker, I have an amendment at the desk.
The gentleman specify which amendment.
This is Amendment 037.
The clerk will report.
Amendment offered by Mr. Burgess of Texas. Page 30, line 6, after the dollar amount, insert reduced by $48 million. Page 60, line 12, after the dollar amount, insert increased by $48 million.
The gentleman is recognized for 5 minutes.
I thank the chairman. Mr. Chairman, at the time the federal government is having to make tough, painful choices on how to prioritize taxpayer dollars, this Congress has yet to learn the lessons of the past as to where we waste the most money. In fact, yet again this year, as in so many years past, the bill before us insists on throwing good money after bad, and it's time to put an end to that wasteful habit. This amendment would strike $48 million from the Nuclear Nonproliferation Account, which is an earmark for a bailout to a failing uranium enrichment company, the United States Enrichment Corporation, known as USEC. This $48 million would be put towards deficit reduction. Look, opponents of the amendment are going to claim that this money is necessary, vitally necessary for national security, but in fact that could not be further from the truth. In fact, the question of whether the United States Enrichment Corporation is truly necessary for our national security needs is actually being reviewed right now by the General Accountability Office, which is expected to release a report on both the national security question as well as the economics of sending further taxpayer dollars to the United States Enrichment Corporation. Because the report is pending, it is in the best interests of hard-earned taxpayer dollars that we suspend any further aid to USEC until we have more information as to what the company is doing with the money that it is receiving. Indeed, the United States Enrichment Corporation is so poorly run that last May, the New York Stock Exchange threatened to delist USEC due to its desperate financial health. Articles over the years have documented USEC's financial woes, including the near-monthly collapse of its stock prices. During the June shareholders meeting, just a few weeks ago, 80% of USEC shareholders voted to approve a reverse stock split due to its rock-bottom share prices. It's shocking to most observers that the company has avoided bankruptcy thus far, and it's only done so because of the continued bailout by Congress year after year in the Energy and Water Appropriations Bill. As if USEC's financial troubles were not enough, just last month, the company filed a federal lawsuit against the United States for more than $38 million. This House is contemplating giving $48 million to USEC. They've got a lawsuit for $38 million. 2 decades ago, the Congress created by charter the United States Enrichment Corporation, believing that USEC could better run the uranium enrichment facilities than the government itself. But by now, it should be intuitively obvious to the casual observer that Congress was wrong. Since its inception, USEC has squandered billions of dollars in federal bailouts, running its operations to near insolvency because of poor decisions. Yearly they come to the Congress and the executive branch, hat in hand, begging for millions of dollars in bailouts to continue operation sites that are technologically out of date. It is time that the federal government stop the endless bailouts to a failing enterprise. Moreover, USEC has been a bad faith actor in its negotiations with the uranium mining industry, which provides the needed raw materials to be enriched at these facilities. And what motivation does USEC have to negotiate in good faith with the miners when it knows that if it doesn't get everything it wants from the miners, it can simply go to the Department of Energy, receive a handout time and again, either in the form of a direct cash payment or in the form of spent uranium tails. The Department of Energy has had a long-standing agreement with the uranium mining industry not to dump more than 10% of the market's worth of uranium in handouts to USEC at any given time. Yet, it's become increasingly clear that the Department of Energy is willing to ignore that agreement and provide any bailout that USEC requests or desires. This betrayal of the mining industry threatens thousands of jobs across the western United States. States like Texas, Nevada, New Mexico, Illinois, and Wyoming, to name a few. Arguments that USEC is the only facility that can supply tritium to the Department of Defense ignores the plain language of the Washington Treaty and the U.S.-India nuclear agreement known as the 123 Agreement. The Department of Energy has in its possession enough highly enriched uranium and tritium to last for 15 years, costing hundreds of millions of dollars less than the continued bailouts that USEC is currently receiving from the country. It's time the Congress stood up against the continual bailouts of a failed business model. Propping up one failed company at the expense of an entire industry, it's not how we should operate in Congress. So let's end the bailout. Let's return the money to the Treasury. Let's give the hardworking taxpayer a break. It's time we did the right thing. I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman's time has expired. For the purpose of the gentleman from New Jersey, rise.
Move to strike the last word.
Gentleman's recognized for 5